What if everything you thought you understood about this royal saga was built on an assumption no one ever proved? Not a scandal, not a leaked text, not a broken relationship, an assumption. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because right now, across social media, comment sections, late-night live streams, and whispered voice notes passed between royal watchers, one phrase keeps appearing again and again. It's over. Not shouted. Not celebrated. Said quietly, almost cautiously. And the unsettling part? No one can agree on what exactly just ended. So let me ask you something uncomfortable right at the start. If there were nothing to hide, why does this story refuse to die? Take a breath. Because what you're about to hear isn't a neat conspiracy or a tidy expose. It's messier than that. More human. More disturbing. This isn't about proving something. It's about understanding why millions of people suddenly believe something unimaginable could be true. And why the palace, of all institutions, is saying absolutely nothing. For years, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have lived under a microscope. Every interview dissected. Every word weighed. Every pause analyzed. We've seen public fights, private pain, televised confessions, and bitter divides. We've seen accusations fly in every direction. But this moment feels different. Because this time, the focus isn't on Harry. It isn't on Meghan. It isn't even on the monarchy itself. It's on two children who never asked to be part of a global narrative war. And that alone should make you uneasy. Here's where things take a turn. Just weeks ago, a wave of online posts began circulating with an alarming claim. Not backed by documents. Not confirmed by any official source. But repeated with such confidence that people began treating it as settled truth. The claim? That the palace possesses definitive proof. That identities are not what the public believes. That the truth has been contained rather than denied. And perhaps most chilling of all, that Harry and Meghan know something the rest of the world doesn't. Now stop for a moment. Ask yourself this. If this were complete nonsense, wouldn't it have been shut down immediately? The royal family has a long history of responding when lies threaten the institution. Sometimes aggressively, sometimes subtly, but rarely with total silence. And yet this time, nothing. No denial. No clarification. No carefully worded sources close to the palace. Just a vacuum. And into that vacuum poured speculation, fear, anger, and belief. Because silence, especially from power, is never neutral. It creates space. Space for imagination. Space for fear. Space for people to fill in the blanks themselves. And people are very good at filling in blanks. Let's rewind for a second. This isn't the first time whispers about Archie and Lilibet have surfaced. Similar rumors flared briefly years ago, only to fade when attention shifted elsewhere. At the time, most dismissed them as cruel, invasive, or absurd. But this resurgence didn't look like the others. The language changed. Instead of questions, people started saying proof. Instead of rumors, they said evidence. Instead of what if, they said wait until it comes out. And when language shifts, belief often follows. What made this moment different wasn't new information. It was timing. Consider what's happening in the royal world right now. Uncertainty at the top. Public anxiety about the future of the monarchy. Succession conversations resurfacing in mainstream media. A global audience already primed to distrust institutions. This was fertile ground. And into that environment dropped a narrative that hit at the deepest human nerve of all. Identity. Who belongs? Who doesn't? Who is legitimate? Who is pretending? Those are ancient questions. Dangerous ones. And history tells us they are rarely asked innocently. Now, let's talk about the phrase that keeps being repeated. DNA proof. 3 letters that carry enormous weight. Scientific. Final. Undeniable. Except here's the problem. No DNA has been released. No lab has spoken. No legal process has occurred. And yet, the phrase moves faster than facts ever could. Why? Because DNA doesn't just suggest doubt. It promises certainty. And in a world drowning in uncertainty, certainty is intoxicating. But certainty without evidence is something else entirely. It's belief. So where did this belief come from? Not from the palace. Not from courts. Not from medical authorities. It came from repetition. A YouTube clip here. A thread there. A confident voice saying, trust me. And when enough people say the same thing, the brain begins to relax its defenses. You've seen this happen before, haven't you? A claim starts small. It gets framed as a question, then as a possibility, then as a likelihood. Then suddenly, people are shocked anyone would doubt it. That's not how truth works. But it is how narratives win. Now here's where the emotional tension spikes. Harry and Meghan have built their public image around control of narrative, telling their story on their terms, speaking when they choose, withholding when they believe silence is more powerful. But in this moment, they haven't addressed it directly. No fiery rebuttal, no lawsuit threat, no carefully curated interview clip, just nothing. And for people already inclined to suspect, silence reads like confirmation. Is that fair? Maybe not. Is it human? Absolutely. Because when children are involved, logic often steps aside and emotion takes the wheel. Ask yourself honestly, if you believed even for a moment that something fundamental about your children was being questioned publicly, how would you react? Would you shout? Would you retreat? Would you lawyer up? Would you wait? There's no universally correct answer, which is why every reaction, or lack of reaction, gets interpreted through bias. Supporters see restraint. Critics see avoidance. And the palace? The palace sees something else entirely. Risk. Because acknowledging a rumor can legitimize it, but ignoring it can let it grow. This is the paradox of power, and the monarchy has danced this line for centuries. Now let's zoom out. Why does this story matter so much to so many people who have no personal stake? Because it isn't really about Archie or Lilibet. It's about trust. Trust in institutions. Trust in media. Trust in what we're told versus what we observe. Every generation has a moment where faith in official narratives cracks. For some, this is that moment. And once trust fractures, people start looking for hidden explanations. Not because they love chaos, but because chaos feels more honest than silence. And this is where things become truly unsettling. Because whether these claims are true, false, or somewhere in between, the damage doesn't wait for verification. Belief alone is enough to alter perception forever. Once people start asking, what if? They rarely stop at, probably not. They move to, why hasn't this been addressed? And then to, who benefits from us not knowing? And that question changes everything. Because it shifts the story from gossip to power, from curiosity to motive. And motive is where things get dangerous. Who would benefit from doubt? Who would lose from certainty? Who controls the flow of information? And who decides when the public is ready to know anything at all? As we move forward in this story, we are not here to declare answers. We are here to follow the trail, to slow down the noise, to separate what is claimed from what is possible, to understand why this moment feels heavier than all the others that came before it. Because one thing is undeniable. This isn't fading. It's escalating. And the longer silence continues, the louder the speculation becomes. So here's the real hook. Not whether the claims are true, but why so many people are convinced the truth has already been decided behind closed doors, and why they believe the public just hasn't been told yet. In the next section, we're going to trace exactly how this narrative refused to disappear, where it began, how it evolved, and why every attempt to dismiss it only seemed to make it stronger. Because the claim didn't survive by accident. It survived because something about it resonates. And once you see how that happened, you may start to understand why people are saying, quietly and ominously, it's over. But what came next would give that phrase an entirely new meaning. And no one saw it coming. What is it about certain stories that refuses to die, no matter how many times they're denied, discredited, or ignored? Some stories fade quietly. Others, against all odds, find a way to come back. They resurface on social media, in whispers between journalists, in late-night podcasts. They mutate, grow, and gain new layers of meaning. And then, suddenly, everyone is talking about them again. This is exactly what happened with the claims surrounding Archie and Lilibet. A rumor that should have been dismissed years ago refused to disappear. And the longer it lingered, the more powerful it became. But how does a story survive when there is no public proof? Let's rewind to the first time the claim began to circulate. It wasn't in tabloids. It wasn't in major newspapers. It started online, on forums where royal enthusiasts dissect every detail of the monarchy. Posts were cautious at first, phrased as questions, as speculative thoughts. Is it possible? Could it be true? A whisper. A possibility. But whispers have a way of becoming shouts, especially when repeated enough times. The early posts were easy to dismiss. Most readers didn't pay attention, assuming they were exaggeration or fantasy. Yet the rumor didn't vanish. It began to find new life every year, often coinciding with high-profile appearances by Harry and Meghan, interviews, or viral documentaries. Timing, as we'll see, is everything in a narrative like this. The persistence of the claim is fascinating because, on the surface, it is baseless. There are no public documents, no verified DNA evidence, no credible sources speaking on record. Yet, in the digital age, baselessness doesn't stop a story, it often helps it. Stories with ambiguity are the most sticky, the hardest to shake off. They give the audience space to imagine, to fill in the blanks, to become complicit in the narrative themselves. And once you involve the audience in speculation, it no longer matters whether the story is true. The story has power simply because people believe it might be. Why did this particular rumor endure when so many others faded? One reason is the human fascination with identity. From the earliest myths to the tabloids we read today, stories about parentage, lineage, and legitimacy have always captivated us. There's something primal about the question, who belongs? Who doesn't? Who is hidden behind the mask of expectation? These questions hit deeper when children are involved. Because when the youngest members of a family, or a royal family, are questioned, the stakes feel immediate, personal, almost sacred. Another reason is repetition. The same claim began popping up across different platforms. A YouTube channel mentioned it in passing. A Twitter account repeated it as insider information. A TikTok video dramatized it, showing blurred images of Harry and Meghan with children, while text floated across the screen implying secrets. The story spread exponentially. Each repetition gave it legitimacy in the eyes of the audience. As humans, we tend to equate repetition with truth. And this story repeated itself often enough to embed itself in collective consciousness. But it wasn't just repetition that kept the rumor alive. It was contradictions and anomalies. Every minor inconsistency in public announcements, every word carefully chosen in interviews, every pause analyzed by commentators. These became fuel. In a narrative so fragile, the tiniest perceived discrepancy becomes proof in the eyes of believers. A birth announcement phrased in a particular way. A photo published at a certain angle. An interview question answered with unusual caution. All these small details were magnified, dissected, and turned into evidence. And then came the power of anonymous insiders. People claiming to have first-hand knowledge appeared online. They offered hints, teased confirmations, dropped fragments of language that sounded confidential. Often, these claims were contradictory. One insider would say one thing, another would say the opposite. But contradictions didn't kill the story, they strengthened it. They made the narrative feel alive, evolving, secretive. The audience began to treat uncertainty as proof that the story was real. If it were false, wouldn't it have been simple to disprove? There's also a psychological factor at play here. When people feel they are part of a secret, when they are given the role of uncovering hidden truths, they become emotionally invested. They are no longer passive consumers. They are participants. This creates a powerful bond with the story, one that is resistant to facts, denials, or rational explanations. And for some, questioning the story feels like questioning the competence of those who know more than the public. It becomes personal. The story's longevity is also tied to timing and context. Each resurgence of the claim has coincided with moments when the monarchy was under intense public scrutiny. A documentary airs. A high-profile interview is released. Harry and Meghan appear in public after a period of silence. Each of these moments primes the audience to look for secrets, to read between the lines, to believe that something is being hidden. And in the absence of clarity, the human mind fills the void with speculation. Yet here's what makes this rumor especially potent. It targets the one area of royal life that is usually shielded from scrutiny: children. The monarchy is often a story of public duty, inheritance, ceremony, and scandal among adults. But children are meant to be protected, off-limits. When a story even hints at questions surrounding their identity, it crosses a line. It becomes emotionally charged. People react viscerally. Protective instincts kick in. Fans, Critics and casual observers alike are drawn into the narrative, compelled to have an opinion, compelled to choose sides. And then there is language. The careful, deliberate, and loaded language used when discussing these claims. Terms like DNA proof, true parentage, and revealed carry enormous weight. They imply finality, evidence, and certainty. But no such evidence has been released. The phrases exist in a vacuum, repeated, circulated, and amplified. And in that vacuum, belief grows faster than fact. The power of language is amplified by the absence of response. Harry and Meghan have largely remained silent regarding this specific claim. Silence in the face of a controversial story can be interpreted in countless ways. Supporters see restraint, prudence, and dignity. Critics see confirmation, fear, and avoidance. The ambiguity intensifies speculation. The lack of denial makes space for imagination, and in imagination, the story thrives. History shows that some stories survive precisely because they are left unanswered. From legends to modern scandals, unaddressed questions grow into myths. People remember the gaps, not the denials. They fill them with dramatic interpretations. And once a story reaches this stage, it often no longer matters whether it is true. The belief itself has become a self-sustaining force. Another critical factor is the echo chamber effect of modern media. A claim posted on a forum can migrate to Twitter, then YouTube, then TikTok. Each platform adds its own spin, its own drama, its own emotional intensity. By the time the story reaches the mainstream, it has taken on a life of its own. Details are distorted, emphasis is shifted, and the original context is often lost entirely. And yet, the story continues to captivate millions, each believing they are witnessing something new. So why do people keep returning to this claim, year after year? Because it appeals to fundamental human instincts. Curiosity, fear, and the desire for hidden knowledge. It plays on the notion that there is a secret that someone in power doesn't want you to know. It flirts with the forbidden. And in the digital age, forbidden narratives spread faster than any controlled, sanctioned statement. This story survived because it taps into these instincts at every level. It is emotional, mysterious, and personal. It engages our sense of morality, what is right, what is fair, what is hidden. It engages our sense of justice, who has power, who is vulnerable, and who controls the narrative. And it engages our sense of drama, the possibility that everything we see publicly is a mask, concealing truths far more shocking than anything openly acknowledged. And so we arrive at the present moment. The rumor refuses to die because it has become more than speculation. It has become a cultural touchstone, a mirror reflecting anxieties about truth, identity, and trust in the institutions we once assumed were stable. And in that mirror, every silence, every carefully worded statement, and every carefully avoided comment is magnified, examined, and interpreted as though it were proof itself. And what comes next? Why is the story accelerating now, more than ever? Why do people say it's over and mean it in a way that chills even seasoned observers? Because this time, the claim isn't just floating in the ether. This time, it has crossed a threshold. The next chapter isn't about rumors anymore. It's about how the palace responds, or doesn't respond, to a narrative that refuses to be ignored. And what came next would change the tone of the entire saga, and no one saw it coming. Silence. It's one of the most powerful tools in any institution's arsenal, and the palace wields it better than most. For centuries, the British monarchy has mastered the art of saying nothing while saying everything. A pause, a carefully chosen word, a statement released at the exact right moment. These are all ways power communicates without revealing too much. And yet, there are moments when silence speaks louder than words. Moments when the absence of a statement sends shockwaves louder than any press release could. This is one of those moments. When whispers about Archie and Lilibet's parentage resurfaced online, you might have expected the palace to respond. In the past, even minor rumors triggered swift action, sometimes legal threats, sometimes carefully worded clarifications. But this time, nothing. Not a word. Not a denial. Not even the familiar, polite evasions that have become synonymous with royal communication. Why? The answer is complicated. It could be strategy, it could be shock, or it could be a combination of both. Let's start with strategy. Institutions like the monarchy thrive on control of the narrative. But control doesn't always mean immediate response. Sometimes the wisest move is to observe, to measure the public reaction, to allow misinformation to burn itself out, or to gauge exactly how far it spreads. Responding too quickly can give a story credibility, or worse, provoke a backlash that multiplies attention. In this sense, silence is not absence, it is action. It is observation. It is careful containment. There is historical precedent. Decades ago, when rumors threatened the reputation of certain royals, the palace often stayed silent for months. During that time, stories either faded on their own or, paradoxically, were eventually confirmed indirectly through official channels that had nothing to do with the original claim. The lesson is clear. Sometimes saying nothing is the strongest statement of all. But strategy alone does not fully explain this silence. There is shock. Because even for an institution used to crises, certain claims cross lines that are difficult to navigate. Questions about children are exactly that. They are not just about public perception. They are about human lives, private bonds, and emotional boundaries. The palace, with all its experience in media management, is not immune to the gravity of certain revelations. A statement about children, true or false, cannot be made lightly. A misstep could inflame controversy, invite legal challenges, or further erode trust. So what appears as an action may, in fact, be deliberation. A moment to weigh consequences. A moment to consider who can speak, what can be said, and how it will land in a media landscape that devours every nuance. And yet, from the outside, it looks like nothing. For observers, for fans, for critics, this silence is deafening. Every day without a statement becomes another day for speculation to grow. Every avoided question, every non-response, every subtle redirection in interviews is analyzed as if it were a clue. People look for meaning in the pauses, in the timing of social media posts, in the smallest gestures of the royals themselves. And they almost always find it, because human beings are wired to make patterns out of ambiguity. Consider the timeline. After the initial wave of online claims, the palace did not release any public comment. There were no statements from communications directors. There were no denials from spokespeople. The usual channels, press offices, official websites, even public interviews, remained silent. For the audience, this absence becomes a canvas on which every fear, every suspicion, and every belief is projected. And then there's the psychological effect of silence on those being scrutinized. Harry and Meghan, who have spent years learning how to navigate both public praise and condemnation, are now caught in a situation where speaking could create as many problems as it solves. Say too much, and you risk giving credence to the claims. Say too little, and the vacuum is filled by speculation. Either choice carries enormous stakes. The public reaction to silence is predictable. On one side, supporters see restraint, composure, and protection of the children. On the other, skeptics interpret it as confirmation, evasion, or fear. This duality only intensifies the narrative, giving the story a life of its own. It evolves beyond the control of its subjects. It becomes a phenomenon, one that the palace cannot simply erase with words. Then there is the role of the media ecosystem. In the past, the palace could manage rumors through traditional press channels. Newspapers, television, and controlled interviews provided a clear path to respond. But today, information moves faster than any press office can react. Social media amplifies uncertainty. Anonymous accounts, forums, podcasts, and short-form video platforms distribute speculation with lightning speed. By the time the palace could respond, the story has already been transformed, reshaped, and spread across millions of feeds. Silence, then, is also defensive. It is a recognition of the limits of control in the digital age. It is acknowledgement that once a story is unleashed online, no carefully crafted statement can completely contain it. The palace knows this. They have faced viral moments before. But the difference now is the emotional intensity and the focus on the children. This raises stakes to a new level. The silence also serves as a filter. Stories that are ephemeral fade into memory. Stories that survive silence are the ones that resonate deeply. They are the stories people carry forward, debate in private conversations, and revisit repeatedly. In this sense, Inaction tests the strength of the claim. Will it die without attention, or will it grow stronger? In this case, it grew stronger. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect is the interplay between public expectation and institutional behavior. People assume a statement is necessary because they want clarity, but the palace operates under different rules. Its priorities are stability, protocol, and legacy. Emotional satisfaction for the public is rarely part of the calculation. This creates tension between perception and intention, making silence appear either manipulative or negligent, depending on your perspective. And then there is the ripple effect. Silence invites interpretation from a diverse range of voices: journalists, commentators, social media influencers, historians, and even casual viewers. Each interpretation adds a layer to the narrative. Each layer makes it harder to separate fact from fiction. The longer the silence persists, the thicker the fog becomes, and the story begins to feel inevitable, as though some unspoken truth is waiting to be revealed. In this chapter, we can see a pattern emerging. The rumor about Archie and Lilibet did not survive by chance. It survived because the palace's silence created space. Space for speculation. Space for emotion. Space for belief. Space for myth. And in that space, the claim evolved from a whisper into a phenomenon that refuses to be ignored. So what comes next? How does an institution like the palace navigate a story that touches the most vulnerable members of a family while the world watches, waits, and speculates? How do the royals respond, or not respond, without creating more fuel for the fire? The next chapter will explore the documents, statements, and anomalies people keep pointing to as evidence. The paper trail that observers analyze obsessively, the words dissected line by line, the seemingly minor details that feed a narrative far bigger than any single fact. Because what came next would reveal just how much the silence mattered, and why every small clue was scrutinized to the point of obsession. When a story refuses to die, people start looking for proof. Not physical proof, not legal proof, not verified proof, but hints, fragments, clues, lines and documents that seem to matter, even if the original intent was entirely mundane. This is the story of the paper trail that everyone claims exists, a trail that fuels speculation about Archie and Lilibet. It begins with the announcements. Birth announcements are a ritual in royal life, carefully worded, precise, and historically significant. Every word chosen to convey meaning while adhering to centuries of protocol. Observers, both casual and obsessive, read these announcements like cryptographers decoding secret messages. And when whispers about parentage resurfaced, analysts pored over every line, searching for anomalies. One of the most cited phrases appears in the official notice of Archie's birth. To most people, it's a simple, ceremonial statement. To those invested in the story, every word seems loaded with subtext. Observers dissected commas, phrasing, and order of names, wondering if there was a subtle signal buried between the lines. Was it coincidence? Was it a deliberate choice? Or was it, as some claim, a breadcrumb left by insiders? The truth is unclear, but the fact that it sparked discussion illustrates how powerful text can be when people want it to mean something. Then there are the interviews and public statements. Meghan and Harry, especially, have been scrutinized for every verbal nuance. A pause here, a slight emphasis there. Even the omission of certain details has been interpreted as evidence. One commentator noted that when discussing Archie and Lilibet, Harry used the term "our children" in one context but avoided it in another. It seems trivial, but in the minds of believers, this becomes a signal. Every omission is a message, every word is a clue. It doesn't stop with official announcements. Researchers and enthusiasts have pored over documents from secondary sources. Press releases, charity filings, official schedules, and even Instagram posts by close family friends. Dates, locations, and public appearances are cross-referenced. If a statement seems out of sync with another, it is cataloged. A dinner invitation can become suspicious. A photo with shadows in certain places can be seen as a hint. And in the age of digital preservation, nothing is ever lost. Every tweet, every Instagram story, every archived article becomes potential evidence to interpret. Observers also focus on historical patterns. Royal births, baptisms, and announcements follow strict traditions. Analysts compare past phrasing and protocols with current announcements. Any deviation, no matter how minor, is highlighted. For example, if one phrase was traditionally used for every child born to a royal couple, and now a slightly different phrase appears, speculation explodes. Was it a stylistic choice, or was it signaling something else? In this world, nothing is neutral. Every word carries potential significance. Some observers point to indirect statements made in interviews by other royals or staff. These statements often seem ambiguous at best, cryptic at worst. For example, a comment about family bonds or lineage is dissected line by line. When combined with the already loaded context of online claims, it becomes proof in the eyes of believers, even when the original speaker likely had no such intention. And then there are the contradictions. Whenever analysts find something that doesn't quite match the narrative, it becomes magnified. A date that seems off. A reported visitor who never actually appears in other sources. Minor discrepancies are treated as though they are deliberate signals. Why? Because in a story driven by speculation, ambiguity is fuel. Every gap in the paper trail becomes a bridge to the unknown. At the center of all this is the tension between certainty and ambiguity. People want proof, but they also want mystery. They need something to debate, to analyze, to pass along as a tantalizing secret. The paper trail provides just enough detail to seem concrete, while leaving enough ambiguity to ignite endless speculation. It's the perfect storm: facts that aren't facts, signals that may be signals, and a public prime to interpret every nuance. Interestingly, the power of the paper trail is amplified by its accessibility. In previous decades, only journalists or historians could cross-reference documents, statements, and announcements with any accuracy. Now, anyone with a laptop, a search engine, and persistence can follow the breadcrumbs. The democratization of research creates a new dynamic. The audience becomes co-investigator, co-narrator, and co-believer all at once. And when millions participate, the story gains its own momentum. There's also the emotional dimension. People who believe the claim about Archie and Lilibet are emotionally invested. They are looking for confirmation that their suspicions are valid. The paper trail serves as a canvas for projection. A missing line? Proof. An unexpected phrase? Evidence. Every anomaly is interpreted through the lens of desire. Desire to uncover hidden truth. Desire to expose deception. Desire to know what the public has not been told. But it's important to note that the paper trail is never straightforward. Some of the most cited documents are incomplete, out of context, or misinterpreted. A single phrase taken out of a longer statement can appear sinister or cryptic when the full document tells a mundane story. And yet, once a detail is highlighted online, it rarely disappears. It is copied, reposted, and reframed in ways that reinforce the narrative. The phenomenon isn't unique to this story. Across history, every controversial narrative has relied on selective documentation. Leaked letters, court filings, press releases, and even diaries can all be weaponized in the court of public opinion. Context is often ignored. Ambiguity is amplified, and the line between truth and belief becomes dangerously thin. The paper trail, in this case, also intersects with digital media. Every archived statement, every press clipping, every social media post is saved, shared, and dissected. Influencers create proof compilations with timestamps, screenshots, and annotations. They walk audiences through patterns, coincidences, and minor deviations. And the more they do, the more the narrative solidifies in collective perception. Even viewers who approach the story skeptically are drawn in by the weight of documentation, real or misinterpreted. At its core, the paper trail is a mirror. It reflects what people want to see, what they are willing to believe, and what they are afraid to confront. It is simultaneously fragile and powerful. A single misplaced word can trigger a global debate. A missing comma can become a headline. A vague reference in an old announcement can dominate forums for months. The paper trail is not just a record, it is a narrative engine. So what happens when the story reaches this point? When the paper trail has been analyzed to exhaustion, when anomalies are highlighted and amplified, when every fragment is a potential clue, the stage is set for the next level of speculation. Interpretation of actions, motives, and reactions. This is where the narrative moves from documents to behavior, from words on paper to decisions made behind closed doors. And that's exactly where the next chapter begins. We will examine how the public and private reactions of Harry and Meghan, what they say, what they do, and what they don't say, interact with the paper trail. How their restraint, intentional or otherwise, becomes another layer of interpretation. How silence, coupled with documentation, fuels belief. And how every move they make is scrutinized as though it were evidence itself. Because what comes next will show why the paper trail is not merely historical, it is alive. It drives speculation, shapes perception, and keeps the story in motion. And what happened after these documents were analyzed would push the narrative into a realm where few imagined it could go. The internet has a peculiar way of turning uncertainty into conviction. A question repeated often enough becomes a declaration. A suggestion framed cleverly becomes evidence. And doubt, the very thing that should invite skepticism, often becomes proof in the eyes of those who want to believe. This is the strange, almost alchemical magic that has kept the story surrounding Archie and Lilibet alive and terrifyingly potent. It starts with the platforms themselves. Social media is designed to amplify engagement, not truth. Algorithms prioritize content that sparks emotion, provokes debate, or encourages sharing. Every post about the rumored DNA claims, no matter how speculative, receives a boost simply because it evokes shock, curiosity, or outrage. A single Twitter thread questioning a minor detail in a birth announcement can go viral overnight, not because it is verified, but because it engages the audience. And virality is what gives doubt its power. Once millions see it, the content is no longer a fringe theory. It becomes a collective concern. The internet thrives on repetition. The same claim appears in multiple forms: tweets, TikToks, YouTube videos, and discussion forums. Each repetition reinforces the idea, embedding it in the minds of the audience. Humans are remarkably susceptible to the illusory truth effect, a cognitive bias where repeated statements are more likely to be perceived as true, even if they are false. This is not a failure of intelligence. It is a basic feature of human psychology. And when doubt is repeated enough times, it effectively becomes proof for millions of people. But repetition alone is not enough. The internet adds layers of visual and textual framing that make doubt persuasive. Videos with dramatic music, captions that hint at secrecy, and strategic pauses in narration create a sense of authority. Screenshots of documents, cropped images, and highlighted text give the illusion of verification. Even if the source is weak or anonymous, the format suggests credibility. People see the presentation and assume accuracy. Seeing is believing, even when what is seen has been manipulated to appear meaningful. Community dynamics also play a crucial role. Forums, social media groups, and comment sections create echo chambers where doubts are repeated, amplified, and validated. A single post questioning the parentage of Archie and Lilibet is shared, then commented on by dozens of others who noticed the same thing. People begin to cite each other as authority, creating a feedback loop that makes speculation feel like fact. The more people participate in reinforcing the claim, the more it solidifies as collective knowledge, regardless of verification. Memes and viral content accelerate this effect. Humor, irony, and dramatization allow the narrative to travel further while embedding serious ideas in playful packaging. A meme implying secrecy or hidden truths can reach millions faster than a long investigative article. And because the audience is entertained, they are more likely to internalize the message. Emotion, not logic, becomes the vehicle of persuasion. Then there is the role of selective sourcing. Influencers, commentators, and content creators often cherry-pick information to fit the narrative. A minor inconsistency in a past interview becomes a smoking gun. A blurred photograph becomes suspicious. Each fragment, isolated from context, is framed as evidence. And when multiple creators repeat the same selective details, it creates the illusion of corroboration. Doubt accumulates. Proof seems inevitable. Psychology intensifies the process. People want to belong to the group that knows the truth. They seek validation for their suspicions. The more they discuss the claim online, the more they are emotionally invested. This makes it harder to doubt the very narrative they are helping to propagate. The internet does not merely spread information. It spreads belief, conviction, and identity. People define themselves in part by the truths they accept, even when those truths are unverified. Anonymous accounts amplify this further. Voices claiming to be insiders or whistleblowers add urgency and weight to claims. These accounts often release tantalizing details without evidence, keeping audiences on edge. Even if their credibility is questionable, the perceived secrecy makes the information feel more valuable. Human nature rewards the seeker of secrets, and the internet allows that reward to scale exponentially. Algorithmic bias accelerates belief. Platforms are engineered to keep users engaged. If a person interacts with one post about the alleged DNA claims, the algorithm delivers dozens more, reinforcing the narrative. The user experiences confirmation at every turn, encountering content that appears independent but consistently supports the same idea. Doubt becomes self-fulfilling. The more one investigates, the stronger the conviction becomes. And there is a timing element. Every surge in speculation coincides with moments of heightened attention. Interviews, documentaries, public appearances, or anniversaries of key events. Algorithms detect spikes in engagement and push related content further. Every resurgence feels new, dramatic, and urgent. Audiences believe they are discovering fresh evidence, even when it is recycled, misinterpreted, or entirely speculative. One of the most potent mechanisms is the reinterpretation of past content. Old interviews, press releases, and social media posts are revisited with modern suspicion. A phrase that once seemed innocuous is now dissected. A photo that once seemed celebratory is now framed as staged or cryptic. This retroactive interpretation transforms historical content into evidence for present claims. Every past event is recontextualized to fit the narrative, reinforcing belief in the speculation. The emotional stakes of this process cannot be overstated. The story is not abstract. It concerns children, family, and legacy. People feel protective, outraged, and invested. The internet turns these emotions into tools for propagation. Every like, comment, share, and retweet reinforces the collective belief. Doubt morphs into moral certainty. Belief becomes a badge of identity. Interestingly, the very design of online spaces encourages escalation. The audience competes to discover the truth first, to share the most compelling interpretation, to demonstrate insight. Each new post or video attempts to raise the stakes, adding dramatic flair, speculation, or supposed hidden details. The narrative escalates beyond the control of any single participant, moving from discussion to performance. The rumor becomes performative truth, truth as spectacle. But here's the paradox. The more widely circulated, the harder it is to verify. The speed and scale of digital dissemination make traditional fact-checking slow and reactive. By the time a correction or clarification is issued, millions have already internalized the speculative narrative. Skepticism struggles to compete with immediacy, drama, and repetition. Doubt thrives because it is faster, more emotional, and more engaging than verification. The internet also encourages collaboration in rumor building. Thousands of independent actors, each analyzing fragments, sharing interpretations, and debating anomalies, collectively construct a version of truth. No single person or source is responsible, yet the outcome is a fully elaborated narrative. Doubt becomes communal proof. The story gains momentum precisely because it is decentralized. And so we arrive at the present, an environment in which every subtle gesture, every minor discrepancy, every unverified statement becomes magnified. Silence from the palace or the family is interpreted as confirmation. Obscure documents or statements become irrefutable evidence. And the audience, having participated in decoding the clues, believes they are witnesses to revelation, not manipulation. This chapter demonstrates a critical principle. The internet does not merely spread information. It transforms uncertainty into conviction. Doubt becomes proof through repetition, framing, emotional investment, algorithmic amplification, and collective participation. A story that might have been ignored in the pre-digital era now dominates discourse, shaping perception, belief, and behavior. And what comes next? After the internet has converted speculation into conviction, the story shifts again, from documents to insiders, from historical anomalies to personal interpretations. The next chapter explores the role of anonymous sources, their motivations, and how their carefully worded leaks escalate doubt into near certainty for millions. Secrets are seductive. Mystery is intoxicating. And in a story as sensitive and charged as the one surrounding Archie and Lilibet, anonymous sources are the engine that keeps the speculation alive, powerful, and explosive. They are the catalysts that turn vague rumors into compelling narratives, giving audiences just enough to hook onto while withholding confirmation, because the magic of secrecy lies in what is not said. From the very beginning of this cycle, whispers have been attributed to unnamed insiders. People describe them as former staff, friends of the family, or people close to the palace. Each statement comes shrouded in ambiguity, never fully verified, and often strategically vague. A single claim might say, "Someone told me something you wouldn't believe," or "I've seen documents no one else has." Nothing concrete is provided. Yet the aura of insider knowledge is enough to create belief. Anonymous sources work because they leverage trust without accountability. The human brain tends to ascribe credibility to perceived proximity to power. Someone inside is assumed to have first-hand knowledge. If a person is reportedly connected to the palace or royal staff, their words carry weight, even if there is no evidence beyond their claim. And because the source is anonymous, the audience cannot check them, challenge them, or confront them. Doubt becomes impossible to verify. The internet magnifies this effect. Once a source makes a statement, it is repeated across social media, news articles, podcasts, and discussion boards. Each repetition strips away context while amplifying urgency. An anonymous claim that might have been a footnote in a traditional investigative article now becomes a headline in a YouTube video or a viral tweet. Repetition gives credibility, and credibility reinforces belief. These sources also thrive on ambiguity and contradiction. One insider might say, "The children's parentage is more complicated than anyone realizes," while another claims, "What is being reported is only half the story." On the surface, these statements conflict. Yet the contradiction itself fuels speculation. Why would insiders disagree unless there was a hidden truth? For audiences craving revelation, ambiguity becomes confirmation of secrecy. Then there is the emotional pull of insiders. People are drawn to the idea that someone is risking everything to share forbidden knowledge. Anonymous sources are framed as brave whistleblowers revealing hidden truths that the public is not supposed to know. This framing adds drama and authority, making even minor claims seem monumental. Viewers and readers are swept along, compelled to pay attention, share, and believe. The tactics of anonymous sources are deliberate. They rarely release complete information. Instead, they drip-feed hints, each fragment carefully calibrated to maximize intrigue. They offer tantalizing details that suggest knowledge but never provide verification. The effect is addictive. Audiences return repeatedly, hoping the next snippet will reveal the ultimate truth. In the case of Archie and Lilibet, sources have hinted at documents, statements, or evidence that allegedly prove what many dare not say aloud. And yet, nothing concrete is ever revealed. Anonymous sources also exploit timing. Statements often emerge during moments of heightened attention, a new interview, a viral video, or an anniversary of a key event. The claims are positioned as timely revelations, enhancing their perceived relevance. By aligning with public interest, insiders ensure their words are spread, debated, and amplified. Each surge of attention validates their credibility in the eyes of the audience, even if no verification exists. The social aspect is critical. Online communities treat insider statements as puzzles to solve. Each ambiguous claim invites analysis, discussion, and conjecture. People dissect language, analyze timing, and compare with public records. The audience becomes co-investigators, attempting to decode the hidden meaning behind the words. And the more invested they become, the more entrenched the narrative is. Doubt solidifies into belief. Not all anonymous sources have the same motive, of course. Some may seek attention, followers, or influence. Others may want to profit financially from speculation, driving traffic to websites, channels, or subscriptions. and some may genuinely believe they are revealing truths they consider morally important. Regardless of intention, the effect is the same. The audience receives information that is tantalizing, unverifiable, and emotionally charged. Another important factor is the selective presentation of information. Anonymous sources rarely give full context. A minor observation can be elevated to major significance. A casual comment overheard in passing becomes interpreted as insider knowledge. The absence of supporting detail is framed as confirmation of secrecy. If everything were normal, wouldn't they just tell us? By withholding explanation, these sources create a vacuum that the audience instinctively fills. And in that vacuum, speculation becomes reality. Psychology plays a role here as well. People are more likely to believe claims that align with their pre-existing beliefs, desires, or suspicions. Anonymous sources tap into this by offering statements that validate concerns about secrecy, deception, or institutional control. The ambiguity allows each reader or viewer to interpret the claim in a way that confirms what they already suspect. In this way, insiders are not just sources of information. They are mirrors reflecting audience bias and emotion back at them. It's also worth noting the cumulative effect of multiple sources. One anonymous voice might be dismissed as unreliable. Two conflicting voices create intrigue. Multiple voices, each reinforcing fragments of a narrative, create the illusion of corroboration. When dozens of individuals, none of whom can be independently verified, provide overlapping hints, the audience interprets this as confirmation. The story gains momentum, independent of fact, because perceived insider knowledge feels inherently credible. Yet the danger of these sources is clear. By existing outside verification, they can shape perception without accountability. Their words can damage reputations, inflame public opinion, and distort understanding. In the case of Archie and Lilibet, anonymous sources have transformed speculative doubt into a persistent, emotionally charged narrative that commands global attention. And the lack of accountability ensures that the story can continue, evolve, and escalate without being contradicted effectively. This is where the tension reaches a peak. The audience is caught between curiosity and skepticism, desire and doubt. Anonymous sources feed this tension. They provide just enough information to feel credible, while leaving gaps that must be filled by belief. In doing so, they create a self-sustaining cycle. The more the audience analyzes, debates, and spreads the claims, the stronger the narrative becomes. The role of anonymous sources illustrates a profound truth about modern storytelling. In a world where documentation, social media, and viral content intersect, the line between rumor and perceived fact is dangerously thin. Sources who hide behind anonymity can manipulate this line, shaping perception with precision. And in the most emotionally charged stories involving children, family, and legacy, the impact is magnified exponentially. By now, the story surrounding Archie and Lilibet is no longer simply a rumor. It is a collective creation. Fueled by documents, amplified by social media, and reinforced by anonymous voices. Each element interacts with the others, creating a narrative that feels inevitable, unassailable, and omnipresent. And yet, the true origins and validity of the claims remain elusive. So what happens when this network of anonymous voices intersects with public action, media speculation, and institutional silence? That's the next layer of the story. In the following chapter, we will examine Harry and Meghan's public and private reactions, what they say, what they do not say, and how every gesture, pause, and statement becomes another piece of this intricate, explosive puzzle. When rumors swirl around powerful figures, the public response, or the absence of it, can be as telling as the most carefully crafted statement. For Harry and Meghan, whose lives have been scrutinized for every word, every pause, and every glance, this is a story in which silence itself is a form of communication. But how do silence, careful phrasing, and subtle gestures transform speculation into a near reality in the public imagination? That is what we explore in this chapter. At first glance, it appears Harry and Meghan have chosen restraint. In the months following the renewed whispers about Archie and Lilibet's parentage, there has been no public statement, no interview denial, no social media post addressing the claim directly. To some, this is strategic. To others, it is shocking. And yet, their silence does not equal inaction. Every public appearance, every interview, and even the timing of social media activity is analyzed with intense scrutiny. Consider interviews Harry and Meghan have conducted in the past. In every one, they have learned to speak with precision, using carefully measured language to convey emotion, assert agency, and manage narrative. But in the face of claims regarding their children, the approach is markedly different. Phrases are neutral, discussions are deflected, and answers avoid specifics. A simple response about family life, or a pause before answering a question, can now be framed as deliberate evasion. To the untrained observer, these are minor conversational choices. To analysts, they are signals, a silent acknowledgement of the rumors without confirming them. Silence, however, is a double-edged sword. On one side, it is protection. The less said, the lower the risk of providing fodder for speculation. By avoiding direct statements, Harry and Meghan maintain legal safety, preserve personal privacy, and shield their children from public scrutiny. On the other side, silence feeds the narrative machine. In the absence of a clear denial, the audience interprets the lack of response as confirmation. Every unspoken word, every delayed reaction, becomes a placeholder for mystery. It is the blank page on which observers project their assumptions. The timing of public appearances also plays a crucial role. Every event attended, every photograph released, every engagement scheduled is analyzed for hidden meaning. A walk in the park with the children, a carefully framed family photo, or a charity appearance can be interpreted as deliberate signaling, or as a subtle omission of expected interaction. Analysts scrutinize gestures, posture, and expressions, searching for clues to the private dynamics that the family refuses to publicly disclose. A smile, a handshake, or the distance between two people in a photo can become symbolic. Online, fans and critics alike amplify every movement. A quiet social media post becomes a statement. A caption, a hashtag, or the lack of a mention about the children fuels interpretation. The line between personal expression and public message blurs, creating a feedback loop where every action, intended or not, becomes part of the narrative puzzle. In this environment, silence is as communicative as speech. Psychology explains why this works so powerfully. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We interpret ambiguous signals as meaningful, especially when stakes are high. The suggestion of secrecy is more compelling than clarity. When people believe something important is being withheld, they invest attention, emotion, and belief into deciphering what is unsaid. Every moment of restraint, therefore, magnifies speculation and reinforces narrative tension. Yet there is nuance to Harry and Meghan's choices. Their public appearances are not wholly defensive. They carefully cultivate positivity, social engagement, and messaging aligned with causes they care about. This duality creates a contrast, outward normalcy juxtaposed with the swirling rumors. To the audience, the contrast itself becomes evidence. If everything is ordinary, why is there so much speculation? The very act of living publicly, yet speaking selectively, fuels curiosity and suspicion. The media also amplifies the effect of their measured responses. Headlines interpret pauses, quotes, and omissions as statements. Prince Harry avoids questions about children, reads as a verdict, even if the reality is simply a tactful deflection. Analysts break down interviews frame by frame, word by word. Every hesitation is dissected, every repeated word is cataloged, and every interpretation, regardless of accuracy, is broadcast globally, further embedding belief in the narrative. There is also the legal dimension. Addressing certain claims about children carries risk, legal, reputational, and personal. Public denial or confirmation could trigger litigation or unwanted scrutiny. By carefully avoiding specifics, Harry and Meghan minimize exposure while maintaining the flexibility to respond in the future if necessary. Their strategy is less about silence as ignorance and more about silence as calculated preservation. But here's the paradox. The very strategy that protects them also strengthens the story. In a world primed for scandal, ambiguity is a magnet. It attracts attention, fuels speculation, and transforms curiosity into obsession. Supporters may see restraint, critics see avoidance. The same behavior simultaneously maintains dignity, and amplifies intrigue. It is the tightrope act that defines modern celebrity in the age of social media. The emotional impact is equally significant. Audiences care deeply about children and family. Every action, or inaction, by Harry and Meghan is interpreted through an emotional lens. Protective instincts are triggered. Readers and viewers feel outrage, concern, and empathy simultaneously. The story is no longer about mere rumor. It is about perceived injustice, secrecy, and the stakes of identity. Emotional engagement magnifies the effect of narrative techniques, making belief more potent than skepticism. In this landscape, even small gestures are monumental. A post mentioning one child, but not another becomes symbolic. A public smile can be interpreted as reassurance, or as a mask concealing anxiety. A pause before answering a question about family triggers speculation that would be absurd in another context. The audience becomes co-author of the narrative, filling in gaps with their interpretations. Harry and Meghan's silence is not empty. It is fertile ground for story creation. And as the weeks pass, the silence compounds. Every moment without a statement becomes another day for speculation to metastasize. The narrative grows, gaining velocity with each repetition, each online post, and each subtle observation. What began as uncertainty now feels like inevitability. If the family is silent, it must be because there is truth hidden from the public eye. The very act of protecting their children feeds the story of intrigue. By now, the story has reached a critical juncture. The combination of ambiguous statements, careful public appearances, and sustained silence has transformed speculation into a near-accepted reality for millions of observers. And this is where the next chapter picks up. How these reactions intersect with media reporting, social amplification, and the creation of a seemingly irrefutable narrative. Because what comes next will show how perception, silence, and selective revelation combine to create the illusion of proof. An illusion that feels real even to the skeptical. And what happened after this carefully managed public behavior would change how the story was understood on a global scale. In today's hyper-connected world, stories no longer unfold linearly, they explode. A rumor, a subtle hint, or an ambiguous statement can travel across continents in seconds, amplified by the media ecosystem in ways that blur fact and fiction. For the speculation surrounding Archie and Lilibet, media amplification has been the key engine, transforming whispers into a global frenzy.